the sun rises over the golden sands of Mesopotamia, illuminating the ruins of a civilization that appeared to emerge from nothing. In the clay tablets of ancient Sumer, stories are etched of the Anunnaki, those who from the heavens came. We often view these accounts as mere mythology, the poetic expressions of a primitive people. But imagine a different reality. What if these beings were not gods of the imagination, but flesh and blood architects of our species? For thousands of years, they occupy the throne of the world, overseeing the construction of monolithic wonders and the birth of written law. They walk among us as kings and teachers, steering the course of human evolution with cold, calculated precision. Today, we peel back the layers of time to examine a world governed by celestial masters. We explore a history where humanity is not the architect, but the apprentice. The void of space is never truly empty, but for the travelers from the distant reaches of the solar system, the silence is a familiar companion. Far beyond the orbit of Neptune, a celestial body of immense proportions moves along an elongated, elliptical path. This is Nibiru, a planet cloaked in a thick, protective atmosphere, carrying a civilization that has mastered the fundamental laws of the universe. Every 3,600 years, this wandering giant swings inward, cutting through the plane of the inner planets like a visitor from another dimension. As it approaches the warmth of the sun, the light catches the metallic sheen of its clouds, reflecting a dull, copper glow. On the surface of this world, the atmosphere is failing. The life-giving warmth that sustains their society is leaking into the cold vacuum of the cosmos. Their scientists, beings of immense intellect and longevity known as the Anunnaki, have calculated a desperate solution. They require a specific element to suspend in their upper atmosphere, a shield to reflect radiation and trap heat. They need gold, and their scans have identified a pale blue world, third from the sun, where this precious metal lies in abundance within the veins of its mountains and the silt of its rivers. The descent begins. A fleet of massive, shining vessels detaches from the orbit of Nibiru, their hulls shimmering with an iridescent luminescence. These are not merely ships, but mobile laboratories and habitats, designed to survive the harsh transition between worlds. They pierce the atmosphere of Earth 445,000 years ago. To the wild creatures roaming the plains of the Pleistocene, the sky appears to tear open. A roar like thunder rolls across the horizon, followed by the sight of silver birds descending on pillars of white flame. The primary landing site is chosen with precision. It is the Persian Gulf, a region where the waters are shallow and the land is rich with life. The vessels splash down with the force of falling mountains, sending massive plumes of spray into the air. When the steam clears, the surface of the water is calm once more, but the world has changed forever. Enki, the brilliant scientist and prince of the Anunnaki, is the first to set foot on the alien soil. He is a figure of imposing stature, his physical form optimized by millennia of genetic refinement. To a modern observer, he would appear as a giant, standing nearly 10 feet tall, his skin possessing a faint, metallic luster. He breathes the air of Earth, rich in oxygen and heavy with the scent of salt and ancient vegetation. For the Anunnaki, this is a frontier of untamed beauty and daunting challenges. The first settlement is established. They call it Eridu, which means the home built far away. It is not a city of stone and mortar, but a complex of modular structures, glowing with internal power sources that defy the understanding of primitive physics. Eridu sits at the edge of the marshes, a hub of activity where the Anunnaki begin the monumental task of surveying the planet. They are the lords of the sky, but they find themselves tethered to the mud and the heat of a wild earth. The early years are defined by the struggle against the environment. The sun of this solar system is brighter and harsher than the one Nibiru experiences during its long winters. The Anunnaki must adapt. They wear shimmering suits that regulate their body temperatures and protect them from the unfiltered solar rays. They deploy drones, small, humming disks that zip across the landscape, mapping the geography and identifying the largest deposits of gold. As the survey expands, the Anunnaki realize that the gold in the riverbeds will not be enough. The vast quantities required to save their home planet lie deep beneath the earth in the southern reaches of the African continent. This realization shifts the mission from a simple expedition to a massive industrial undertaking. Enki oversees the construction of more permanent structures, while his brother Enlil, the commander of the mission, arrives with reinforcements. The arrival of Enlil brings a new sense of order and urgency. While Enki is a creator and a thinker, Enlil is a leader of iron will. He views Earth not as a laboratory, but as a resource to be harvested. Under his direction, the Anunnaki workforce is divided. A group known as the Ijiji, the lower tier of their society, is tasked with the grueling physical labor of mining. These are beings of great strength, but even they find the conditions on Earth nearly unbearable. Deep in the Abzu, the gold-rich regions of Southeast Africa, the silence of the Earth is shattered by the sound of advanced machinery. The Anunnaki use sonic drills that melt through solid rock and crystalline cutters that carve perfect tunnels into the crust. The Ijiji descend into these dark pits, working cycles that last for hundreds of years. Because the Anunnaki live for thousands of years, time moves differently for them. What feels like a lifetime to a native creature is but a single shift for an Ijiji miner. Above ground, the landscape begins to reflect the presence of the gods. In Mesopotamia, the marshes are drained and irrigation canals are cut with laser precision. The Anunnaki introduce plants from their own world, experimenting with the local flora to create high-yield crops. They build ziggurats not as temples for worship, but as landing pads and communication hubs. These massive, step towers are topped with blue glazed tiles that shimmer in the sun, serving as beacons for the ships that travel between Earth and Nibiru. The relationship between the Anunnaki and the planet is one of total dominance. They see the lions, the mammoths, and the early hominids as mere background elements of the ecosystem. The primitive humans that roam the fringes of the Anunnaki territories are little more than curious shadows to the masters of Eridu. These early humans observe the silver towers and the flying craft from the safety of the forests, their minds unable to grasp the technology they witness. To them, the Anunnaki are not extraterrestrials, they are the forces of nature personified. They are the bringers of storms, the shapers of the land, and the masters of the light. As centuries turn into millennia, the strain on the Ijiji begins to show. The gold extraction is slow and the labor is relentless. The atmosphere of Earth, while life-sustaining, is taxing on their biology. The heat of the mines, the weight of the gravity, and the sheer isolation from their home world breed a growing resentment. In the quiet of the barracks, whispers of rebellion begin to circulate among the workers. Enki remains focused on his biological studies. He is fascinated by the genetic diversity of Earth. He spends his hours in the laboratories of Eridu, sequencing the DNA of the indigenous species. He sees a potential in the primitive hominids that his brother Enlil does not. While Enlil sees only a wild planet to be exploited, Enki sees a canvas. He begins to contemplate a radical solution to the labor crisis, one that would involve blending the essence of the Anunnaki with the biology of the local primates. The tension reaches a breaking point 50,000 years into the mission. The Ijiji abandon their tools in the mines of the Abzu. They march toward the residence of Enlil, setting fire to their equipment and demanding an end to their servitude. The rebellion is a pivotal moment in the history of the planet. For the first time, the divine order of the Anunnaki is challenged. Enlil, ever the disciplinarian, prepares to use force to quell the uprising. But Enki intervenes. He proposes a compromise that will change the course of terrestrial evolution. He suggests the creation of a primitive worker, a being capable of understanding instructions and using tools, but one that is not as advanced or long-lived as the Anunnaki themselves. This new creature would take over the burden of the gold mines, freeing the Ijiji from their toil. The Council of the Gods gathers in the Great Hall of Eridu to debate the proposal. The air is thick with the hum of power and the weight of a decision that will echo through the ages. To create life is a sacred and dangerous undertaking. It requires the manipulation of the very building blocks of existence. Enlil is skeptical, fearing the consequences of introducing a new intelligence into the world. But the desperation of the mining crisis and the threat of civil war among his own people force his hand. Permission is granted. Enki, along with the chief medical officer Ninhursag, begins the great experiment. They select the most promising of the indigenous hominids, a creature with the physical stamina to endure the mines but lacking the cognitive depth of the Anunnaki. In the sterilized environment of the laboratory, they begin the process of genetic hybridization. They use their own blood, their own essence, to bridge the gap between the stars and the soil. The first attempts are failures. The creatures produced are monstrous or sterile, unable to survive the harsh realities of their intended purpose. But Enki and Ninhursag are persistent. They refine the sequence, balancing the divine and the earthly. Finally, a successful prototype is born. It is a being that stands upright, with hands capable of delicate manipulation and a mind that can be taught. They call this new creation the Lulu, the Mixed One. It is the ancestor of the modern human, a biological tool designed for a specific industrial function. The Anunnaki look upon their creation with a mixture of pride and detachment. They have not created a child, but a servant. With the birth of the Lulu, the first frontier of the Anunnaki reign reaches its conclusion. The era of the gods working the earth themselves has ended, and the era of the human apprentice has begun. The gold begins to flow in unprecedented quantities. The ships return to Nibiru laden with the precious metal, and the atmosphere of the home world begins to heal. On Earth, the Anunnaki transition from laborers to overseers. They become the kings and the architects of a world that is being reshaped in their image. The cities of Mesopotamia grow larger, their walls higher, as the population of the Lulu workers expands. The landscape is now a network of mines, canals, and temples. The Anunnaki move through their domains with the grace of immortals, their every whim served by the creatures they engineered. They have established a hierarchy that will define human civilization for thousands of years to come. Earth is no longer a wild wilderness. It is a managed colony, a vital cog in the survival of a galactic empire. The foundation of the long reign is set, and the shadow of the Anunnaki stretches long over the history of the world. The sun rises over a world that is not yet ours. In the shimmering heat of the Mesopotamian floodplains, the horizon is broken not by mountains, but by the jagged silhouettes of rising ziggurats. This is the era of the first city, Eridu. a monolithic achievement of stone and gold that stands as the anchor of an extraterrestrial empire. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and wet silt. This is the dawn of the long reign, a period when the Anunnaki do not merely live upon the earth, but actively reshape its very crust to suit their inscrutable needs. To understand the golden burden, one must look beneath the surface of the soil. The mythic record suggests a period of immense environmental engineering. The great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, are not viewed as mere accidents of geology. In this forgotten history, they are the result of celestial hydraulics. For thousands of years, the lesser gods, known as the Igigi, have labored in the muck. They are the workforce of the Anunnaki elite, and their task is nothing less than the terraforming of a planet. They dig the channels that will carry the lifeblood of the Mesopotamian valley. They divert the marshes, drain the swamps, and raise the embankments. The scale of this labor is beyond human comprehension, stretching across generations of immortal life. The burden is literal. It is the weight of the basket, the bite of the spade, and the relentless heat of a sun that feels heavier on this world than on their own. The Igigi are the forgotten middle class of the cosmos. While the great lords Enlil and Enki debate the future of the mission from their high temples, the Igigi face the raw reality of the earth. The soil is stubborn. The floods are unpredictable. The atmosphere of the young earth is a chaotic veil that must be tamed. Every canal dug is a victory against the wilderness, but it is a victory bought with the exhaustion of beings who were never meant to be servants. At the heart of this massive operation is the extraction of gold. The narrative of the Anunnaki is inseparable from this precious metal. It is not sought for currency or for vanity, but for survival. The atmosphere of their home world, Nibiru, is said to be failing. Fine particles of gold, suspended in the air of their distant home, are the only shield against the lethal radiation of deep space. Thus, the Earth is transformed into a planetary quarry. The gold must be pulled from the deep veins of the Earth, refined in the heat of Mesopotamian kilns, and sent upward into the blackness of the sky. This is the central paradox of the Eden they are building. It is a paradise of gardens and orchards, but it is founded upon the grueling reality of a mining colony. Enki, the lord of the earth and the master of the deep waters, oversees the project with a mind like a master architect. He establishes the Abzu, a subterranean realm that is part laboratory and part command center. From the Abzu, the flow of the rivers is regulated. The tides are monitored. Enki is the deity of craft and wisdom, the one who understands that to rule the earth, one must first master its water. He watches as the Igigi grow weary. He sees the cracks forming in the celestial hierarchy. The labor has continued for 40 periods, a span of time that likely encompasses hundreds of thousands of earthly years. The immortal patience of the Igigi is reaching its limit. The landscape begins to change under their hands. What was once a trackless waste of reeds and salt water becomes a geometric masterpiece of irrigation. The first gardens are planted. These are not the wild growth of nature, but the curated biological displays of a superior intelligence. The concept of Eden, the Jindanu, takes shape. It is a walled enclosure, a protected space where the climate is controlled and the flora is engineered for maximum yield. Here, the Anunnaki walk in the cool of the evening, enjoying the fruits of a labor they did not personally perform. The contrast between the lush interior of the gardens and the brutal conditions of the mines creates a tension that ripples through the divine court. Enlil, the Lord of the Air and the Supreme Commander of the Earth mission, views the planet with a cold, administrative eye. For him, the earth is a duty to be managed, a resource to be harvested. He has little patience for the complaints of the working gods. He demands order. He demands quotas. He represents the unyielding authority of the Anunnaki throne. As the Ijiji toil in the heat, Enlil remains in his high mountain home, the Dur and Ki, the bond between heaven and earth. He is the overseer of the law, the one who ensures that the gold flows upward and the hierarchy remains intact. The crisis arrives not with a thunderclap, but with a fire. The Ijiji, driven to the point of madness by the unending labor, finally break. They set fire to their tools. They burn the baskets and the spades that have been their constant companions for millennia. In the dead of night, they surround the temple of Enlil. The flickering torches cast long, dancing shadows against the massive walls of the sanctuary. This is the first labor strike in history, a rebellion of the divine against the divine. The Ijiji declare that they will no longer carry the burden. They will no longer dig the rivers or haul the silt. The machinery of the Mesopotamian Eden grinds to a sudden, terrifying halt. The Council of the Gods is convened in a state of emergency. The atmosphere in the assembly is thick with resentment and fear. Enlil is furious, his pride wounded by the insolence of the workers. He demands that the leaders of the rebellion be executed and that the labor continue under the threat of annihilation. But Enki, the pragmatist, sees a different path. He understands that the Ijiji are not merely lazy. They are broken. The earth is a heavy world, its gravity and its elements wearing down even the hardiest of celestial spirits. The golden burden has become too great for any god to carry. It is during these tense deliberations that the idea of a new solution begins to form. The Anunnaki possess the knowledge of life itself. In their laboratories within the Abzu, they have experimented with the biological blueprints of the earth. They have seen the primitive creatures that roam the edges of the marshes, the hominids that exist in a state of nature. Enki proposes a radical shift in the cosmic order. If the gods will not work, then a servant must be fashioned to take their place. This servant must be capable of understanding commands, of handling tools, and of enduring the heat of the sun. It must be a being that is part of the earth, yet shaped by the wisdom of the heavens. The landscape of Mesopotamia stands as a silent witness to this transition. The empty canals, the half-finished temples, and the abandoned mines are the scars of the old era. The golden burden is about to be transferred. The era of the Ijiji is ending, and the era of a new creation is about to begin. But the transition is not merely a matter of labor. It is a transformation of the earth itself. The Mesopotamian Eden is no longer just a colony. It is becoming a cradle. The infrastructure laid down by the Anunnaki, the vast network of waterways and the foundations of the first cities, will serve as the template for all human civilization to follow. As the sun sets on this period of divine toil, the world feels expectant. The air is still. The rebellion of the gods has forced a moment of profound creative necessity. The Anunnaki look down from their high places at the rivers they have carved into the skin of the planet. They look at the gold that glitters in the darkness of the earth. The burden remains, but the hands that carry it are about to change. The foundation of the Mesopotamian Eden is complete, and the stage is set for the introduction of a new actor into the cosmic drama. The silence of the marshes is the silence of a world waiting to be born. The rivers continue to flow, guided by the stone embankments. The ziggurats continue to point toward the stars, reminders of the home the rulers long to protect. The shadow of the Anunnaki is no longer just a shadow of power. but a shadow of authorship. They have written their needs into the very geography of the world. They have forged an Eden that is both a garden of delights and a prison of industry. The golden burden has shaped the land, and now it will shape the destiny of a species yet to be named. The ancient world holds its breath as the first chapter of the long reign closes and the second begins, marked by the echoes of the Ijiji protest and the cold, calculated brilliance of Enki's design. This is the bridge between the age of gods and the age of man, built on a foundation of gold and the sweat of the divine. The narrative of the golden burden is more than a story of labor. It is a story of how the physical world we know was supposedly manufactured by hands from elsewhere. Every hill that looks too symmetrical, every river that flows too straight, and every city founded on the ruins of something older whispers of this time. It is the era when the earth was a project, a construction site where the architects were immortal and the goals were celestial. The legacy of this period is not found in books, but in the very soil of the Fertile Crescent, a landscape that was beaten into shape by the sheer will of the Anunnaki and the reluctant labor of the Ijiji. The burden was heavy, the cost was high, but the result was the world as we have inherited it, a place of engineered beauty and deep, hidden purposes. The golden burden has been laid down, and the hands that will pick it up are already stirring in the clay. The Mesopotamian valley, once a wild marsh, is now a functioning engine of extraction, ready for the arrival of its final, most complex component. The light of the dying day touches the peaks of Eridu, and the world waits for the morning. The subterranean silence of the Abzu is broken not by the rhythmic strike of bronze on stone, but by the heavy, rhythmic breathing of a class of beings who have reached their breaking point. For thousands of years, the Ijiji, the younger deities of the Anunnaki hierarchy, have toiled in the deep veins of the earth. They have redirected rivers, raised the walls of cities, and hollowed out mountains to extract the precious gold required to sustain the atmosphere of their home world, Nibiru. But the physical toll of this labor is profound. In the flickering light of the deep mines, the Ijiji drop their tools. Their rebellion is not a sudden explosion of violence, but a collective cessation of movement. They set fire to their shovels and their baskets, and they march toward the great temple of Enlil, the Lord of the Air and the supreme commander of the Earth mission. The confrontation at the gates of the Eker is a pivotal moment in this alternate history. Enlil, ever the disciplinarian, demands the Ijiji return to their posts. He views the order of the cosmos as a rigid hierarchy where everyone has a place and a function. Yet the Ijiji are not mere servants. They are of the same divine lineage as the masters they serve. The tension threatens to tear the mission apart. If the gold stops flowing, the mission fails. If the mission fails, their home world dies. Into this crisis steps Enki, the master of the deep waters and the greatest scientist among the Anunnaki. He observes the exhaustion of his kin with a cold, analytical compassion. He proposes a solution that will forever alter the trajectory of the planet. He suggests they create a surrogate, a biological vessel capable of enduring the labor that the gods can no longer sustain. This is the birth of the project known as the Lulu, or the primitive worker. The task is assigned to Enki and the mother goddess, Ninhursag, the chief medical officer and architect of biological forms. They do not seek to create life from nothing. Instead, they look toward the indigenous inhabitants of the earth, the hominids that have been evolving slowly in the African rift valleys and the fertile plains. These creatures are hardy and adapted to the environment, but they lack the intelligence to follow instructions or use the complex tools of the Anunnaki. The plan is to bridge this evolutionary gap through a process of genetic hybridization. In the house of Shimti, a place often translated as the house where the breath of life is inhaled, the work begins. This is not a scene of magic, but a scene of high technology. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and organic compounds. Ninhursag moves among vats of translucent fluids where the building blocks of life are suspended. The challenge is immense. They must combine the essence of the Anunnaki, their very genetic code, with the biology of the terrestrial hominid. To do this, a sacrifice is required. One of the Ijiji, a leader of the rebellion named Geshtu-E, is chosen. His blood and his intellect, described in the ancient texts as his personality or his soul, are harvested. This is the source of the divine component. It is the catalyst that will spark a leap in consciousness for the creature they are about to design. The process is one of trial and error. The early prototypes are failures. Some are unable to speak. Others have fragile bones or organs that fail under the stress of the Earth's gravity. The documentary lens focuses on the meticulous adjustments made by Ninhursag. She works with the delicate strands of life, weaving the terrestrial and the extraterrestrial into a single tapestry. She is the divine midwife, her hands covered in the fluids of creation. Finally, a breakthrough is achieved. A male and a female are produced who possess the necessary traits. They have the strength of the wild creature and the cognitive capacity of the gods. They can understand language, they can manipulate fire, and most importantly, they can follow the orders of their masters. When the first successful laborer is presented to the council of the gods, there is a profound silence. This creature, the Adamu, stands before them. He is a reflection of his creators, yet he is diminished. He possesses the spark of divinity but is bound to the physical limitations of the earth. He is the first human. Enki looks upon his work with a mixture of pride and calculation. He has solved the labor crisis, but he has also introduced a new variable into the planetary equation. The Ijiji are relieved of their burdens and return to their celestial duties, leaving the mines and the fields to the new race of laborers. The scale of production rapidly expands. The Anunnaki do not need a handful of workers, they need thousands. The laboratory in the Abzu becomes a factory of flesh. The gestation process is standardized, often involving the use of birth goddesses, minor Anunnaki females who serve as surrogates to carry the hybrid embryos to term. This is a period of intense biological industry. The landscape of the Earth begins to change as these new humans are deployed to every corner of the Anunnaki Empire. They are the hands that build the ziggurats, the backs that carry the ore, and the eyes that watch the irrigation canals. The relationship between the creator and the created is purely utilitarian. The humans are taught the basics of agriculture, metallurgy, and construction, but only in service to the gods. They are kept in a state of perpetual adolescence, dependent on their masters for guidance and sustenance. The cities of Eridu and Nippur grow in splendor, fueled by the relentless energy of this new workforce. From the perspective of the Anunnaki, the humans are no different from the cattle in the fields or the tools in the shed. They are biological machines, designed for a specific purpose and discardable once that purpose is fulfilled. However, the divine spark within the human genome begins to manifest in ways the Anunnaki did not fully anticipate. As the generations pass, the laborers do not just mimic the actions of their masters. They begin to observe the world with an emerging sense of self. They look up at the stars and wonder about the origin of the lights that descend from the heavens. They listen to the music of the gods and find themselves humming the melodies in the dark. The genetic legacy of Geshtu-E is a double-edged sword. It grants the human the ability to work, but it also grants the human the capacity to dream. The documentary moves through the vast workshops of the ancient world. We see the dust of the mines coating the lungs of the laborers. We see the vast agricultural estates where humans toil under the watchful eyes of Anunnaki overseers. The hierarchy is absolute. At the top sit the triad of Anu, Enlil, and Enki. Below them are the planetary administrators and the technical specialists. And at the very bottom, supporting the entire weight of this interstellar civilization, is the human race. As the population of humans grows, the logistics of control become more complex. The Anunnaki establish a system of kingship, where a chosen human is granted a portion of divine authority to rule over their peers on behalf of the gods. These kings are the intermediaries, the ones who receive the decrees from the temples and ensure the quotas of gold and food are met. This is the origin of the divine right of kings, a concept that will echo through human history for millennia. The king is the shepherd, and the people are the flock, but the shepherd always answers to the masters in the clouds. The segment concludes with a wide view of the Mesopotamian plain at twilight. The fires of the human encampments dot the landscape like a reflection of the stars above. The air is filled with the sound of grinding stone and distant chanting. The Anunnaki have successfully outsourced their labor, freeing themselves to pursue their own interests and the grander schemes of their mission. But in the quiet moments between the shifts of toil, the humans gather together. They share stories of the lords of the sky, and they look at their own hands, hands that are shaped like the hands of the gods. They are the laborers, the builders, the architects of a world that is not their own. Yet, within them, the blueprint of the divine is already beginning to change the nature of their reality. The genesis of the laborer is complete, and the stage is set for a long and complex history of servitude, rebellion, and the slow, agonizing climb toward consciousness. The earth is no longer a lonely outpost of an alien race. It is a populated world, a hive of activity where the sweat of man buys the grace of the gods. The golden age of the Anunnaki has begun, built on a foundation of flesh and blood. The map of the world is a different shape now. The wild forests of the Holocene are retreating, not through the natural cycles of climate alone, but through the deliberate geometric will of the architects from above. For 10,000 years, the earth does not belong to the humans who walk its surface, nor to the nature that once birthed them. It belongs to the Anunnaki. They have turned the planet into a vast, synchronized engine of production. From the orbital perspectives of their hovering craft, the continents appear as a tapestry of silver lines and golden hubs. In the heart of Mesopotamia, the city of Eridu rises like a mountain of glass and fired brick. This is not a city in the way we understand it today. It is a biological and industrial node. At its center stands the Iabzu, the house of the deep waters, where Enki presides over the hidden mechanisms of the world. The air here vibrates with a low, constant hum, the sound of power generation that human ears interpret as the breathing of a god. The streets are laid out in perfect fractals, designed to funnel the flow of labor and resources with the efficiency of a circuit board. To the common worker, the scale of time is the most terrifying aspect of this dominion. A human life is a fleeting spark, lasting perhaps 40 or 50 years of hard labor in the fields or the mines. But the masters do not age. A child born in the shadow of the ziggurat grows old and dies, and their children and grandchildren do the same, while the same golden figure remains seated on the throne of the inner sanctum. The Anunnaki measure their lives in shars, cycles of 3,600 years. To them, the passing of a human generation is nothing more than the ticking of a second hand. This disparity creates a profound psychological distance. The gods are not just powerful, they are permanent. They are the only fixed points in a world of decay. As the millennia march on, the dominion expands. The Anunnaki do not limit themselves to the Fertile Crescent. Their requirements for gold and rare minerals drive them across the oceans. In the high Andes, they carve massive landing strips and processing plants into the living rock of the mountains. The humans there speak of the Viracocha, the feathered serpent who brings the knowledge of the stars and the precision of the stonecutter. In the Nile Valley, they lay the foundations for monuments that are designed to function as much as celestial observatories as they are symbols of absolute power. The architecture is uniform across the globe. Whether in the jungles of the Yucatan or the plains of Sumer, the pyramid remains the dominant form, a heavy, stable shape that mimics the mountains of the god's distant home. The administration of this global empire is managed through the me. These are the divine decrees, the physical or digital blueprints of civilization itself. There is a me for weaving, a me for metallurgy, a me for law, and a me for kingship. These are not abstract concepts but tangible tools or data sets that the Anunnaki provide to their chosen human intermediaries. High priests and priestesses are trained in the use of these technologies, serving as the middle management of the planet. They are the ones who translate the complex, mathematical language of the gods into the simplified commands of the state. Life for the average human under this 10,000-year reign is one of structured, quiet obedience. The chaos of the hunter-gatherer past is a forgotten nightmare. In its place is the security of the ration and the certainty of the task. The gods provide irrigation, turning the desert into a lush garden that yields 3 harvests a year. They provide the calendar, teaching the people how to track the movements of the planets so that they might know when to sow and when to reap. But this bounty comes at the price of absolute subservience. The temples are not places of prayer in the modern sense. They are tax offices, storehouses, and administrative centers. Every bushel of grain is recorded. Every head of cattle is accounted for. The gods are meticulous accountants. Within the ranks of the Anunnaki themselves, the long centuries of dominion begin to breed a different kind of tension. They are a long-lived race, but they are not immune to the corrosive effects of pride and boredom. Enlil, the Lord of the Command, views the human population with increasing detachment. To him, the humans are a noisy biological necessity, a tool that has become perhaps too prolific. He watches from the heights of Nippur as the human cities swell and the clamor of millions of voices rises like a physical weight into the atmosphere. The silence he once enjoyed is gone, replaced by the endless vibration of human activity. In contrast, Enki remains fascinated by his creations. He spends his centuries in the laboratories of the Abzu, refining the human genome, experimenting with the limits of their intellect and their capacity for empathy. He begins to see them not just as workers, but as a reflection of the Anunnaki themselves. He teaches them the arts, the nuances of music, and the complexities of written language. This creates a friction within the divine council. Is the goal of their presence on Earth merely extraction? Or is it the cultivation of a new branch of intelligence? The infrastructure of the planet reaches a peak of perfection. There are no wars, for there is no one to fight against the unified might of the gods. There is no famine, for the climate is managed with the precision of a greenhouse. It is a golden age of stagnation. The humans have reached the limits of what they are allowed to know. They can build the walls of the city, but they do not understand the physics of the stones. They can track the stars, but they are forbidden from traveling to them. They live in a world of wonders that they did not invent and cannot maintain without the constant supervision of their masters. The atmosphere of the Earth begins to change under this prolonged administration. The massive mining operations in Africa and the Americas have left scars on the Earth, but the Anunnaki have the technology to heal them, reforesting entire regions once the veins of or are exhausted. They have terraformed the planet into a specialized garden, optimized for their needs. The very air is monitored. The water cycles are controlled by massive dams and subterranean conduits. The Earth is no longer a wild thing. It is a curated estate. But time, even on the scale of the gods, is a heavy burden. After 8,000 years of rule, the initial purpose of the mission begins to blur. The gold shipments continue to ascend into the sky, headed for the home world, but the Anunnaki who remain on Earth have become terrestrial beings. They have tasted the fruits of the Earth, they have breathed its thick air, and they have grown accustomed to the worship of the short-lived creatures beneath them. Some among them begin to lose their connection to the distant home they left behind. They begin to see themselves as the true kings of this world, rather than its stewards. This shift in perspective leads to the emergence of localized dynasties. Subtle rivalries between the various Anunnaki leaders begin to manifest as competition between their respective human cities. A dispute over water rights between two gods becomes a holy war between two city-states. The humans, ever eager to please their masters, take up arms with a fervor that surprises even the gods. The peaceful, geometric order of the early millennia begins to fray at the edges. The weapons of the gods, once used only for clearing land or deep mining, are occasionally seen on the battlefield, leaving glassed earth and shadows burned into stone. The narrator observes that even at the height of this 10,000-year dominion, a shadow is growing. It is not the shadow of an external enemy, but the shadow of the masters themselves. They have ruled for so long that they have forgotten the fragility of the balance they created. The humans are no longer the simple, frightened creatures they once were. They have watched the gods for 100 generations. They have learned the patterns of their anger and the cycles of their mercy. They have become the silent observers of their own masters. The segment concludes as the sun sets over the ziggurat of Uar. The blue glazed tiles shimmer in the dying light, reflecting the stars that the Anunnaki call home. Below, in the darkened streets, the fires of 1,000,000 hearths are being lit. The noise that Enlil so detests is reaching a fever pitch, a hum of humanity that refuses to be silenced. The Golden Age is at its zenith, but the weight of 10,000 years is starting to press down on the thrones of the gods. The perfection of the machine is beginning to shudder, and the first cracks are appearing in the foundation of the eternal empire. The dominion is total, but the world is waiting for a breath of wind that the gods did not command. The cities of the Mesopotamian plain stand as monuments to an impossible precision. For millennia, the Anunnaki have ruled from their ziggurats, overseeing a world where every canal, every field, and every human life serves a divine purpose. But the atmosphere is changing. In the high halls of the gods, the air is thick with a different kind of tension. It is not the heat of the sun or the humidity of the marshes, but a cold, celestial resentment that begins to settle over the assembly of the great ones. Enlil, the lord of the air and the primary architect of the earthly administration, has grown weary. To his ears, the sound of humanity is no longer a rhythmic song of labor and devotion. It has become a cacophony. He describes the noise of man as a roar that prevents the gods from sleeping. In the cosmic hierarchy, when the rulers cannot rest, the subjects must face the consequences. The decree is issued in the secret councils of the Anunnaki. It is a decision that marks the end of an epoch. The gods resolve to cleanse the earth. This is not a surgical strike or a selective culling. It is a total reset of the biological clock. They choose the weapon of water, the most primordial and uncontrollable element, to wash away the noise and the rebellion of a species that has grown too numerous and too loud. The plan is absolute, and the gods are sworn to secrecy. No human is to be warned. No mercy is to be granted. The dominion they built is to be submerged until the slate is once again smooth and silent. However, the Anunnaki are not a monolith. Among them is Enki, the lord of the earth and the master of the sweet waters beneath the ground. He is the craftsman, the one who first suggested the creation of humanity to ease the labor of the gods. To Enki, the destruction of man is the destruction of his greatest work. He is bound by his oath to enlil not to speak to any human, but the god of wisdom finds a way to navigate the narrow channels of his vow. He travels to the city of Shuruppak, where a man named Zayusadra, known in other traditions as Atrahasis or Utnapishtim, resides. Enki does not speak directly to the man. Instead, he speaks to the wall of Zayusadra's reed hut. He whispers to the reeds and the mud bricks, telling the wall to tear down its house and build a boat. He provides the dimensions of a vessel that is more of a floating vault than a ship. It is to be a perfect cube, 7 stories high, sealed with bitumen inside and out. It is a lifeboat for the biological heritage of the planet. Zayusadra listens through the wall, understanding the divine subtext. He begins a massive construction project under the guise of preparing for a departure to the marshes, all while the sky begins to take on a bruised, unnatural hue. The construction of the great vessel is a race against a cosmic clock. Thousands of years of Anunnaki rule have refined human engineering, and now those skills are turned toward survival. The boat is filled with the seeds of every plant, the essence of every beast, and the family of the chosen survivor. In some interpretations of the ancient texts, this is not just a collection of animals, but a repository of genetic information, a library of life stored in a format that can survive the coming pressures. As the final seal is placed on the door, the atmosphere of Earth begins to fracture. The arrival of the storm is described in the tablets as a terrifying spectacle that even the gods find overwhelming. The Anunnaki do not stay on the surface to witness the destruction. They retreat. Their celestial craft ascend into the heavens, hovering in the safety of orbit as the world below dissolves. From their vantage point in the sky, the gods look down and see the earth as a churning cauldron. The clouds turn black, and the sun disappears. The foundations of the deep are broken up, and the celestial sluice gates are opened. The description of the deluge in the ancient records is not merely one of heavy rain. It is a tectonic and atmospheric collapse. The winds howl with a frequency that shatters stone. The water does not just rise from the sea. It erupts from the earth and pours from the sky in a relentless assault. The cities that had stood for tens of thousands of years are ground into silt in a matter of hours. The ziggurats, the great laboratories, and the sprawling gardens are erased. As the storm rages for 6 days and 7 nights, a profound psychological shift occurs among the Anunnaki. From their ships in the sky, they watch the total annihilation of their kingdom. The goddess Ishtar is said to have wept, her voice crying out like a woman in childbirth, as she watched her children float like dragonflies on the surface of the water. Even Enlil, the instigator of the wrath, is confronted with the stark reality of a silent world. The gods realize that without humanity, There is no one to tend the fields, no one to offer the sacrifices, and no one to maintain the order they worked so hard to establish. They begin to feel the pangs of hunger and the weight of a loneliness they did not anticipate. Inside the great cube, Ziusadra and his charges are suspended in a void. The ship is tossed by waves that dwarf mountains. There is no horizon, no stars, and no sense of time. They are the only pulse of life in a world that has been returned to the state of the primordial abyss. The survival of this small group is the only thread connecting the old world of the Anunnaki to whatever comes next. Eventually, the violence of the sky begins to abate. The rain stops, and the winds settle into a low, mournful whistle. The great vessel grinds to a halt, coming to rest on the jagged peak of Mount Nimish. Ziusadra waits. He releases a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven. When the raven does not return, he knows that the earth is beginning to breathe again. He opens the hatch and steps out onto the mud-slick summit. The world he knew is gone. The sprawling metropolises are buried under hundreds of feet of sediment. The lush forests have been replaced by a gray, desolate wasteland. Ziusadra does the only thing a survivor of the old world knows how to do. He builds an altar and offers a sacrifice. The scent of the burning herbs rises into the thin air of the mountaintop. In the heavens, the Anunnaki detect the smoke. Like flies, they gather around the sacrifice, drawn by the first sign of human devotion in weeks. Their anger is replaced by a desperate relief. They realize that life has persisted, and with it, their own relevance on this planet. Enlil is initially furious when he sees the survivor. He demands to know how any human escaped the decree of the gods. But Enki stands his ground, arguing that the total destruction of life was a folly that would have left the gods as rulers of a graveyard. He convinces Enlil that a new arrangement must be made. The world can no longer be as it was. The gods will no longer walk openly among men as they once did. A veil must be drawn between the divine and the mortal. The gods grant Ziusadra immortality and take him to live at the mouth of the rivers, in the land of the blessed. But for the rest of humanity that will follow from his lineage, the rules have changed. The lifespan of man is shortened. The ease of the golden age is replaced by the necessity of hard labor and the constant threat of nature. The Anunnaki begin to withdraw into the shadows of their temples, transitioning from visible rulers to distant, demanding deities. The flood was more than a cleansing of the earth. It was a reconfiguration of the power dynamic between the creators and the created. The waters of wrath washed away the physical evidence of the first great civilization, leaving behind only the stories, the scars in the geological record, and the haunting memory of a time when the gods lived in the house next door. As the mud dries and the first green shoots of grass break through the silt, a new era begins. It is an era where the Anunnaki rule through kings and priests rather than through direct presence. The world is reborn, but it is a world defined by the trauma of the deluge and the knowledge that the gods who give life can, in a moment of celestial frustration, take it all away. The waters recede into the oceans and the deep aquifers, leaving the Mesopotamian plain a blank canvas once again. The survivors descend from the mountains, carrying the seeds of the old world to plant in the soil of the new. They carry the memories of the ziggurats that reached for the stars and the terror of the sky that fell. The dominion of the Anunnaki continues, but it is now a dominion of shadows and legacies, waiting for the next cycle of history to unfold in the mud of the river valleys. The divine cleansing is complete, and the long, slow climb of post-diluvian civilization begins under the watchful, weary eyes of the lords who remain in the heavens. The golden age of the gods does not end with a thunderous war or a catastrophic collapse. Instead, it fades with the haunting quiet of a house being emptied by its owners in the dead of night. For thousands of years, the Anunnaki have been the physical sun around which the world of man revolved. Their presence was not a matter of faith, but a matter of daily reality. Their great metallic houses shimmered on the horizons of the Mesopotamian plains, and their commands echoed through the marble halls of the first cities. But the cycles of the cosmos are indifferent to the civilizations they foster. The celestial clock, governed by the long and eccentric orbit of their home world, begins to signal a closing window. The time of the lords on earth is drawing to an inevitable close. The atmosphere in the great administrative centers of Sumer and the Indus Valley shifts from one of industrious production to one of systematic decommissioning. This is the period of the Great Withdrawal, a time when the sky travelers begin the arduous task of dismantling the infrastructure of a global colony. In the sacred precincts of Nippur and Eridu, the inner sanctums are stripped of their strange, humming apparatus. The glowing crystals and the intricate bronze-like interfaces that allowed the priesthood to communicate with the heavens are packed into heavy, lead-lined crates. The human servants, the scribes and the temple wardens, watch in a state of growing trepidation as the objects of their devotion are prepared for transport. They see their gods, once so involved in the minutiae of irrigation and law, become distant and preoccupied with the stars. The departure is a logistical operation of staggering proportions. Across the globe, from the high peaks of the Andes to the fertile deltas of the Nile, the Anunnaki begin to abandon their outposts. The gold mines in southern Africa, which had fueled the celestial economy for millennia, are allowed to flood. The sophisticated machinery used to pierce the earth is either taken or buried deep beneath the silt of the Orange River. In the Sinai Peninsula, the great spaceport, the umbilical cord between Earth and the orbiting command modules, becomes a hive of activity. Pillars of flame and smoke are seen daily as smaller craft ferry the last of the refined ores and the personal effects of the divine elite to the waiting motherships in high Earth orbit. This is not a sudden flight born of fear, but a measured exit. The Anunnaki are leaving behind a world they have fundamentally reshaped. They have sculpted the landscape, altered the genetic code of the inhabitants, and laid the foundations of culture. As they prepare to go, they face the question of what becomes of the Lulu, the humans who have served them. The solution is the establishment of a proxy government. They do not leave a vacuum. They leave a legacy of kingship. This is the moment when the scepter and the crown are lowered from heaven to earth. The Anunnaki select the most capable of their human hybrid lineages to act as stewards. These are the first true kings of the post-Diluvian world, men and women who claim the divine right to rule because they carry the blood of the travelers and have been instructed in the arts of governance. The scene in the capital of Uruk is one of profound melancholy. The great god Enlil and the wise Enki hold a final assembly of the regional governors. It is a ceremony of transition. The laws are codified into stone tablets, the measurements of the cubit and the shekel are standardized, and the maps of the heavens are gifted to the high priests. The gods provide the blueprints for the future, but they withhold the keys to the machinery. They tell the assembled leaders that the age of direct intervention is over. From this point forward, the gods will be heard in the wind, seen in the patterns of the stars, and felt in the movements of the tides, but they will no longer walk the streets of the cities. The physical departure is witnessed by thousands. The sky is no longer a silent void but a theater of light. Great shimmering discs and triangular vessels rise from the ziggurats, creating ripples in the air that shatter the windows of the mud brick houses below. The roar of their ascent is a sound that will be remembered in myth as the voice of the storm gods. As the craft pierce the atmosphere, they leave behind long, white plumes that linger for days, shimmering like the tails of celestial dragons. To the people on the ground, it is as if the very soul of the world is being pulled upward. The vibrant, living presence of the divine is being replaced by an aching, empty blue. Once the sky travelers have reached their orbital platforms, the silence begins to settle. It is a heavy, physical silence that covers the earth like a shroud. The temples, once vibrant with the hum of alien technology and the presence of the immortals, become cold and hollow. The fires on the altars are kept burning by the priests, but the responses from the inner sanctums cease. The kings sit on their high thrones, clutching their scepters, waiting for instructions that no longer come. They realize that they are now the masters of their own destiny, but it is a mastery born of abandonment. The psychological impact on humanity is profound and permanent. This is the origin of the great longing that permeates human religion, the desire to return to a lost paradise or to be reunited with a creator. The myth of the fall of man is not just about a loss of innocence, but about the loss of a tangible connection to a higher intelligence. For generations, the children of Sumer and Egypt will tell stories of the time when the gods were close enough to touch. They will build their monuments larger and taller, trying to reach the heights to which their masters have vanished. The ziggurats and pyramids are not just tombs or temples. They are architectural prayers, attempts to bridge the growing gap between the earth and the silent heavens. As the Anunnaki fleet maneuvers away from Earth's gravity well, heading toward the outer reaches of the solar system to meet their home world in its crossing, they leave behind a planet that is forever changed. They have left their DNA in the blood of the people, their language in the roots of human speech, and their mathematics in the way we measure time and space. But they also leave behind a sense of mystery. Why did they truly go? Was it merely the mechanics of their orbit, or had the human experiment reached a point where the creators were no longer needed, or perhaps even endangered by their creation? The ruins of their departure are scattered across the globe. Some are hidden beneath the sands of the Sahara, others are submerged in the rising waters of the Mediterranean, and some sit in plain sight, misidentified as the work of primitive hands. The colossal blocks of Baalbek, the perfectly cut stones of the Giza Plateau, and the strange, vitrified ruins in the Indus Valley are the silent witnesses to this departure. They are the scars left on the earth when the cradle was moved. The segment of human history that follows is one of struggle and adaptation. Without the guiding hand of the lords, the various human factions begin to compete for the remnants of power. The kings use the knowledge they were given to build their own empires, often mimicking the hierarchical structures of their former masters. The rituals that were once practical instructions for maintaining alien equipment become religious ceremonies aimed at appeasing absent deities. The transition from the age of gods to the age of men is marked by a desperate attempt to remember what is rapidly being forgotten. The departure of the Anunnaki marks the end of the childhood of the human race. We are left in the nursery with the toys of the gods, but without the instructions on how to use them safely. The memory of the silent departure lingers in our collective subconscious, a distant echo of a time when the sky opened up and our creators returned to the deep dark of the cosmos. We are left to look up at the stars, not as distant points of light, but as a destination, a home to which we might one day return, or a place from which our ancient lords might one day descend again. The cradle is empty, and the long, lonely journey of human self-reliance has truly begun. In the shadow of the abandoned ziggurats, the first historians begin to scratch their records into clay, trying to capture the fading light of an era when we were never alone. They write of the time when the heavens were full, and the earth was a garden tended by those who came from above, and they wonder, with a mixture of fear and hope, if the silence of the heavens is permanent or merely a long celestial pause. The sun sets over the ruins of Eridu, casting long, distorted shadows across the mounds of baked mud and silt. This place, once hailed as the first city of man, sits in a silence so profound it feels deliberate. For decades, archaeologists have sifted through these layers of earth, finding pottery shards and the foundations of temples dedicated to the god Enki. Yet, for a growing number of people around the world, these ruins represent something far more provocative than the dawn of the Bronze Age. They are seen as the landing pads and the administrative centers of a civilization not born of this world. This is the persistent shadow of the Anunnaki, a narrative that refuses to be buried under the weight of academic consensus or the passage of millennia. It is a story that has transcended the boundaries of ancient history to become a modern mythology, a lens through which we examine our own origins and our ultimate destiny. The persistence of the Anunnaki legend lies not just in the dusty tablets of Sumer, but in the physical anomalies that dot the globe. In the high deserts of Lebanon, the megalithic stones of Baalbek remain a source of quiet frustration for traditional engineers. The trilithon, 3 massive blocks of limestone weighing over 800 tons each, sits 60 feet above the ground in the base of the Temple of Jupiter. While historians point to Roman ingenuity, the alternative perspective suggests a much older foundation, one built with a technology that feels more at home in the realm of the celestial. This is where the documentary gaze lingers. We see the sheer scale of the stones and compare them to the frailty of the human frame. The shadow of the Anunnaki is cast across these monuments, suggesting a past where the impossible was routine and the masters of the earth were giants in both stature and intellect. Moving from the physical to the textual, the influence of these figures is woven into the very fabric of human writing. In the mid-20th century, the discovery and translation of thousands of cuneiform tablets provided a glimpse into a world where the boundary between the human and the divine was porous. When Zecharia Sitchin published his interpretations in the 1970s, he did not just offer a new translation. He offered a new worldview. He proposed that the Anunnaki were not metaphorical deities representing the forces of nature, but flesh and blood scientists and explorers from a planet called Nibiru. This interpretation acted as a catalyst, sparking a global fascination that has only intensified with the advent of the digital age. Today, the names Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag are discussed in online forums and global conferences with the same fervor once reserved for the saints. The narrative suggests that we are a species with amnesia, living in the wreckage of a galactic intervention. This idea is a powerful one because it addresses the gaps in our own evolutionary story. Biologists point to the sudden and dramatic increase in human brain size and the development of complex language as markers of natural selection. However, the shadow of the Anunnaki offers a more unsettling alternative. It suggests that our genetic code was not just the result of blind environmental pressures, but the product of a deliberate, perhaps even desperate, act of engineering. We look at the rise of modern gene editing technologies like CRISPR and cannot help but see a reflection of our supposed creators. If the Anunnaki edited us to be workers in their gold mines, we are now beginning to edit ourselves to be something more. The shadow of the past becomes a blueprint for the future. In the laboratories of the 21st century, the ghost of the Anunnaki is present in our quest for longevity and the mastery of the physical world. The ancient texts speak of the gods living for thousands of years, their lifespans measured in SARS, cycles of 3,600 years. While scientists today search for the genetic triggers of aging, the ancient astronaut theory suggests that this knowledge was once common on this planet. We are, perhaps, simply trying to reclaim a birthright that was taken from us when the gods departed. This creates a unique tension in the modern psyche. We are a civilization that prides itself on rationalism and scientific progress, yet we are haunted by the feeling that we are repeating a cycle that has occurred before. The influence of this narrative extends far beyond the realm of alternative history into the world of contemporary art and media. Our cinema is filled with stories of ancient creators returning to reclaim their prize, or hidden legacies buried beneath the ice of Antarctica or the sands of the Sahara. These stories resonate because they tap into a collective intuition that we are not alone and that our history is much longer and more complex than the textbooks suggest. The Anunnaki have become archetypes. They represent the distant, emotionally detached creator, the rebellious scientist who takes pity on his creation, and the stern lawmaker who demands order at any cost. By studying these figures, we are actually studying the different facets of our own humanity. In the vast, arid reaches of the Peruvian desert, the Nazca lines stretch out like a giant chalkboard visible only from the heavens. To the traditional observer, they are ritual pathways or astronomical calendars. To those standing in the shadow of the Anunnaki, they are something else entirely. They are signals, markers for those who travel the stars, or perhaps the scorched remnants of an era where flight was not a dream but a reality. The persistence of these theories is often dismissed as a longing for mystery in a world that has been mapped and digitized. Yet, the mystery remains because the evidence is often ambiguous. We find ourselves standing in the gap between what we can prove and what we can sense. The archaeological establishment often views the fascination with the Anunnaki as a distraction, a pseudoscience that undermines the genuine achievements of ancient peoples. They argue that attributing the wonders of the world to extraterrestrials robs our ancestors of their ingenuity. However, the alternative perspective argues that it actually elevates the human story. It suggests that we are part of a cosmic community, a link in a chain that stretches across the stars. This debate is not just about the past. It is about how we define ourselves today. Are we a solitary species that happened upon intelligence by chance, or are we the descendants of a grander design? As we look at the ruins of the Great Pyramids or the obsidian blocks of Pumapunku, we see the echoes of a precision that defies the copper tools and hemp ropes of the official record. We see stones cut with the accuracy of a laser and moved with a grace that suggests the manipulation of gravity itself. These are the physical echoes in the dust. They remind us that there are still chapters of the human story that remain unwritten, or perhaps chapters that were erased and replaced with a simpler tale. The shadow of the Anunnaki is the persistent reminder that the silence of the desert may be hiding a loud and vibrant past. The psychological impact of this theory cannot be overstated. It provides a framework for understanding the chaos of the modern world. If we are a species designed for labor, our modern systems of hierarchy and production feel like a continuation of an ancient program. If we were given the spark of consciousness by a higher power, our drive to create and explore is a divine impulse. The story of the Anunnaki offers a sense of meaning in a universe that often feels cold and indifferent. It suggests that we were noticed, that we were worked upon, and that we were important enough to be the subject of a 1,000-year experiment. As the camera pans over the modern skyline of a city like Dubai or New York, the narrator observes the similarities between our soaring steel towers and the ziggurats of old. We are still building toward the heavens, still trying to reach the heights inhabited by those who came before. The shadow of the Anunnaki is not just a relic of the past. It is a living presence in our culture. It is found in our space programs, our genetic research, and our persistent belief that something is waiting for us out there in the dark. We are the children of the echoes, the keepers of a legacy we are only beginning to understand. The persistent shadow remains because the questions remain. Why did civilization begin so suddenly in the Fertile Crescent? Why do myths from disparate cultures across the globe share the same stories of gods descending from the sky and teaching the arts of agriculture, mathematics, and law? Why do we feel a pull toward the stars that seems to defy our biological needs? The Anunnaki provide a single, unified answer to these questions. Whether that answer is factual or metaphorical, its power is undeniable. It has shaped our past, it colors our present, and it continues to cast a long, flickering shadow over everything we hope to become. We stand on the edge of a new era, one where we may finally have the tools to verify the claims of the ancient texts. As we send probes to the moons of Jupiter and peer into the heart of distant galaxies, we are looking for the same things the Sumerians described thousands of years ago. We are looking for our makers, our peers, and our future. The echoes in the dust are growing louder, vibrating with the energy of a world that is no longer content with simple answers. The shadow of the Anunnaki is not a darkness to be feared, but a silhouette that defines the light of our curiosity. We continue to dig, to translate, and to wonder, knowing that the greatest secret of all might not be who they were, but who we are because of them. In the end, the persistent shadow is our own, projected onto the canvas of time by the light of a distant and mysterious sun.